now, Will's History Corner with Will Foxley.
Love that. Okay, you guys ready to talk about Argentina? Yeah.
Sure.
Are we gonna? Whoa! Are we gonna get historical with it? Because if so,
yeah,
I'm
we're
in.
getting historical with it.
All right,
But
Scott.
Don't you
Argentinian
worry.
food is really good, though. They have like the skirt steaks with like the chimichurri sauce, and it's really good.
We can do a little history
one on
food
that.
corner too.
I'm
Plus one
hungry
on
now.
that. I'm in.
Okay, Javier Milei won the primary for the presidential election earlier this week, commanding about 30% of the vote against two other parties that came in about 28% and 29% respectively. Now we're waiting for another election to see if he can win 45% of the vote. He was expected to only pull in at third place, but the fact that the libertarian candidate who wants to dollarize the country and is pro-Bitcoin made first place in this primary means that his opportunity to seize the presidency are pretty high. Now, why does this matter? Well, let's go back in time. Over its history, Argentina, since its freedom and independence from Spain, has defaulted 9 times over various decades, the most recent being in 2020, 2014, and 2001. Its chronic defaults have led to a lot of pressure on the economy, inability to grow, and a lot of problems for local populations, which have seen its currency devalue time and time again, and high interest rates. It's led to Argentina actually being one of the highest countries for crypto penetration, with DAI, Bitcoin, and Ether being common units of account all over the country. Ethereum is a huge community and ecosystem with Argentina because of the history of defaults. And now with a possible pro-Bitcoin president coming into office in October, again, possibly, there's still more elections to come, we could see even further advances of crypto within the country. Jen, I'll throw it to you for your take.
Yeah, so I was reading on Bloomberg this morning about the reaction, what has happened in the country since this vote, and it just sounds like it is getting very dire there for people. The Bloomberg is reporting that Argentine shops have been hit with 20% price hike overnight from suppliers. So this is hitting everyone from like salons to cafes, coffee shops. 18% devaluation of the peso announced after the vote. 115% inflation. That's been going on there for a while. People are afraid that hyperinflation could return. And I wonder to see how this will play out, because while he is pro Bitcoin, the story says that there are no plans to introduce Bitcoin as legal tender like they have in El Salvador. And so I'm just curious how we start to address the issues of the people who are living in Argentina, who are experiencing these things that Bloomberg reported this morning. And I don't know if being pro-Bitcoin solves that. And it would be interesting to see, how countries like Argentina maybe look at what's happened in El Salvador and start introducing things. But at the same time, you need infrastructure. There needs to be a plan in place. It takes a really long time to get these things going, and then to get small business owners like cafes and salons to start using Bitcoin as legal tender, to start to bring people away from the economy that has been failing them. And so I don't know what to make of the story. I just feel for the people in Argentina right now. Wendy?
So I want to take this a step further. When I hear that there is a public servant or somebody is bullish on Bitcoin or is keeping an open mind about it, that makes me think, hey, they probably have the same alignment I do when we're talking about money, when we're talking about inflation, when we're talking about the underdogs. So even though there's not necessarily plans to integrate Bitcoin as legal tender like El Salvador, that definitely tells me that this person that is running for office is going to be a little bit more conservative fiscally and could potentially do better for the particular local economy than somebody that was not pro-Bitcoin. Because let's face it, most of the people in America that we have in power now, money printer go burr, just money printer go burr. We're sending money to all of these different places. We keep printing, and that kind of falls back on the taxpayer. As far as inflation in Argentina and all that stuff goes, I'm not there, so I can't comment on it too much. I just think it's absolutely horrible, and it's so sad that the underdogs and just average people are the ones that are suffering because of the poor policies and the poor actions of our public servants. So to me, when I hear that a public servant is pro-Bitcoin, it makes me a little bit more likely to do additional due diligence on them and possibly support them, because they have the same type of mentality that I do when it comes to money.
Yeah, the comments in this piece are pretty interesting, right? Past comments from this guy, just outright saying, quote, central banking is a scam, right? This is stuff that you would hear on, your average crypto podcast. And this is someone who has a decent shot of becoming president in a pretty major economy here in the Western Hemisphere. So the idea that these ideas could advance into the system in some way is super interesting. Jen, I think your point is very well made about sort of the immediate sort of ramifications, anxiety, fears around some of these changes. But it is interesting that the primary part of his proposal is the dollarization of the Argentinian economy, right? What that would look like, I think, in a pretty big place in South America would be really interesting. It might open the door, I guess, for, again, as Will mentioned, the usage of stablecoins, the usage of other cryptocurrencies, the usage of other sort of private sector innovations in the monetary space could become a really interesting example in a bigger economy than El Salvador's, right? Could become really interesting should this advance its way through. But again, it's all preliminary, it's early days. But again, some of the comments that have been made by this guy are super interesting and super in line with a lot of people in the crypto space. So it is interesting to see. Will, what do you think?
Yeah, last thought for me is just going back to like Argentina's early days. It used to be one of the big powerhouses of Western Hemisphere, even like the global economy. We talked about food a second ago. Like beef was a huge part of like their entire economy, and that's where you get the whole stories about like the cattle ranches down there. But they just had so much political turmoil, like military dictatorships, and then also central banking caused a lot of problems, just depending on how you look at the situation. And you see a candidate who's pro Bitcoin come up, and you see the way that crypto has made inroads into communities there, and you start looking and be like, hey, maybe like Argentina's best days are out of it. It's a pretty exciting story.